Hello, I'm Henry Keane. We are UATV and welcome to the News Pulse. Today in the episode, Orbán urgently travels to meet Trump. The reason? Russian oil, of course. Massive overnight drone attack across Russia, oil refineries, depots and power facilities ablaze from Moscow to Crimea. Russia claims an external aggression and moves Oreshnik missile to Belarus. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán said he'll meet US President Donald Trump to try to shield Hungary from the impact of US sanctions on Russian oil. Orbán stated that US President Donald Trump made nothing less but a mistake by imposing strict sanctions on Russian oil, targeting Rosneft and Lukoil, two of Russia's largest oil companies. Answering a journalist's question on whether he thinks Trump overdid it with Moscow, Orbán replied, "From Hungary's point of view, yes, we will look for a way out of this situation, primarily for Hungary." Well, Hungarian point of view can be understood, actually. Hungary depends heavily on Moscow for the bulk of its oil and gas inputs, and this addiction has been created artificially and on purpose. Unlike many of its European Union neighbors, which have worked hard and actually successfully managed to, in a large part, to cut dependency on Russian energy following Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Hungary, in Viktor Orbán's face, has since ramped up its purchases. Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion, Orbán has increased Hungary's dependence on Russian oil from 61% to 86%, while the country consumes about 8 billion cubic meters of gas annually. While Hungarian ministers argue that as a landlocked country with no real alternative fuel sources, Hungary cannot refuse to buy from Russia, the White House, in turn, does not buy such a stance.
Hungary, unlike many of their neighbors, has not made any plans or made any active steps to reduce Russian energy imports. So we're going to continue to work with them, and we're going to work with their neighbors like Croatia and other countries that can help them wean themselves off. Matthew Whitaker, U.S. Ambassador to NATO, from a Bloomberg publication.
A latest, so far, fiery statement from Viktor Orbán. This time, the Hungarian Prime Minister claims that using frozen Russian assets to aid Ukraine could lead to a war between Europe and Russia. At the same time, Orbán insists on direct negotiations between Europe and the aggressor, Russia. Hungary's Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó made a similar statement at the Minsk International Conference on Eurasian Security. He said that Budapest is ready to serve as a venue for talks between the West and Russia. Please look into our story for more details.
Viktor Orbán plans to create an informal anti-Ukrainian alliance within the EU, Politico reports. The publication was told this by Balázs Orbán, political director to the Hungarian Prime Minister. According to him, Hungary's leader wants to coordinate actions with Andrej Babis, whose right-wing populist party won the parliamentary elections in Czechia, and Slovak counterpart Robert Fico. The idea is to align positions ahead of European Union summits and hold preliminary leaders' meetings.
While a firm political alliance remains some way off, the formation could significantly impede the EU's efforts to support Ukraine financially and militarily. The Visegrad 4 alliance split after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine as Poland advocated hawkish positions toward Moscow and Hungary took the opposite stance. A new Visegrad alliance would count 3 rather than 4 members. Poland's current center-right Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, is staunchly pro-Ukraine and is unlikely to enter any alliance with Orbán, from the Politico publication.
Orbán also opposes the European Union's decision for a complete phase-out of Russian energy carriers. Budapest continues to purchase gas and oil from Russia and insists on maintaining supplies. While the government claims the country has no alternative due to geographical constraints, this is not the case. Croatia has offered to help Hungary by importing oil via the Adriatic pipeline. Orbán's policy is criticized both in Brussels and Washington. U.S. Representative to NATO Matthew Whitaker emphasized that the White House expects concrete steps from Budapest to abandon Russian resources. In response, Orbán stated he would seek ways to bypass U.S. sanctions and plans to discuss the situation with President Donald Trump soon.
If we have to pay more, even double, for oil and gas, we cannot pass these costs on to people at the current subsidized utility prices. Therefore, those who want lower utility bills must defend Hungary's right to buy oil and gas from Russia, or at the same price as Russia, or cheaper. This game is not over yet. Sanctions against certain Russian oil companies are indeed in effect. We are working on how to circumvent these sanctions.
Meanwhile, Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó went further. He not only attended the Minsk International Conference on Eurasian Security, but also deliberately began his speech in Russian, calling, quote, to resume international cooperation. Hungary's foreign minister also declared Budapest's readiness to provide a platform for negotiations between Russia and the West. Europe is outraged, both by Hungary's unwillingness to comply with the sanctions regime against the aggressor state and by its direct contacts with Moscow and Minsk.
Support for Ukraine is crucial. This is where all our efforts are going into. As a matter of proof, we have just adopted the 19th sanctions package against Russia. The decisions, as always, on sanctions are in unanimity, and Hungary was part of it. We need unity when it comes to actors that are conducting hybrid threats, attacks against Ukraine, against our neighborhood, such as Russia, such as Belarus. So all this is not sending a good signal.
In proportion to the rise in anti-European and anti-Ukrainian rhetoric in Hungary, the country's rule of law compliance score is declining. This is stated in the World Justice Project report. The trend is the most concerning among all EU member states and highly characteristic of Budapest's allies.
The country, led by right-wing strongman Viktor Orbán, received a score of 0.50 out of a possible 1.0, the lowest rule of law score in the 27-member European Union, and 0.02 below its 2024 score. Only Slovakia saw a sharper decline in its rating within the bloc. Russia recorded the sharpest overall decline between 2024 and 2025 of any nation studied, from the Politico publication.
Not a single euro should be paid to a country that does not respect the principle of the rule of law, declared Sweden's Minister for EU Affairs. Jessica Rosencrantz is convinced that an EU that includes Ukraine will be safer, and greater pressure must be applied to Budapest, which goes against European policy. Reported by Larissa Petruk, UATV News.
Overnight, Russia faced a wave of drone attacks, sparking explosions and fires across multiple regions. Oil facilities in Ulyanovsk, Mariupol and Stavropol were targeted. Russian skies were again lit and shaken as drones targeted the capital, Moscow, forcing airports to halt operations. The mayor of Moscow reported that the first 3 drones heading towards the city were shot down the previous evening around 8 p.m. Then, during the night of October 29th, he writes about repelling and destroying 4 more drones. Over the past night, air defense units intercepted and destroyed another 100 Ukrainian aircraft type unmanned aerial vehicles. According to Russian Ministry of Defense, though, 46 UAVs were shot down over Bryansk, with reports of hits on military facilities in the region. In Ulyanovsk Oblast, near Moscow Oblast, an oil refinery was targeted. There are 3 oil depots that are actually located in just one area, but only one reportedly was hit. It is NS Oil Refinery. The plant processes crude oil and produces gasoline, diesel and fractions, and fuel oil, which capacity about 600,000 approximately tons annually. Explosions were heard in the Republic of Mariupol near Moscow Oblast. According to local residents, eyewitnesses report seeing a fiery glow. Drones struck a local oil refinery. The fire was recorded during the night of October 28th, 29th, 2025. The plant is located more than 1,000 kilometers from Ukraine's state border and has the capacity to process over 1.2 million tons of oil annually. Also in Stavropol Krai, in the Black Sea region, drones targeted a petrochemical plant. According to Channel Astra, Stavrolen plant is one of Russia's main producers of polymers. The plant, part of the recently heavily sanctioned Lukoil group, is amongst the largest Russian producers of plastics. In the ranking of the 100 largest companies of the Russian North Caucasus Federal District by output volume, the company takes third place. It is reported that annually the plant produces around 700,000 tons of polymer plastic annually in temporarily occupied Crimea. Drones on the morning of October 29th caused fires in and around in the city of Simferopol. The Atan oil depot is ablaze after having been targeted back in October 17th when it burned beautifully for several days in a row. It is noted that military fuel trucks camouflaged and equipped with drone protection systems were actively entering and leaving the Simferopol depot the day before the strike. This depot, like the one in neighboring location at town on Gvardiaske, it is actively used to supply the Russian military. The Russian General Staff has announced that the use of long-range Ukrainian drones has increased, raising the threats to residential areas and critical infrastructure all over Russia, according to Deputy Head of the Main Mobilization Directorate of the Russian General Staff, Vladimir Tsemlyansky. While Ukraine is defending itself and targeting military infrastructure, Russian officials are now forced to be worried about the dangers of what exactly their own propaganda has largely hidden from their own population. Well, official authorities in Moscow are only now showing some worries, at least about the lives of their own civilians, while Ukrainian cities continue to face attacks daily and nightly for 4 years. An example of Russian terror was the murder of Ukrainian civilians in the Kyiv region back in 2022 when Russia invaded. Now, gradually, one by one, every person involved in these crimes is being eliminated by Ukraine's main intelligence directorate. Like recently on Russian territory, a police SWAT officer, Lieutenant Colonel Veniamin Mazherin, was eliminated. Ukrainian military intelligence stresses that the Obereg unit of the Russian National Guard, where Mazherin served, had been identified as early as April 2022 as responsible for genocide and violations of the laws and customs of war in the occupied areas of Kyiv region.
In any country in the world, people will eventually face deserved punishment. The only deserved punishment for such actions can be their elimination. I do not consider anything else. This is my personal opinion, and I stand by it. I will put it into action. Kirilo Budanov, head of the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine.
We all remember Putin once said, "Russia has no borders." Where Russian soldiers set his boot in, that is Russia. With such a militarized, narcissistic perception of the world, it is obvious that everyone trying to oppose your invading boot is committing an act of aggression against you. Russia is reviving Soviet-era narratives and preparing the nation for mobilization. That, with such a rate of dead and wounded lost on the front lines in Ukraine, seems inevitable. The Institute Study of War explains what stands behind the Kremlin's words and actions. The day before, on October 28th, Russian Foreign Intelligence Service stated that France was allegedly preparing a military contingent of about 2,000 troops to be sent to front lines in Ukraine, a claim that Institute called completely baseless. According to the Russian propaganda, this contingent is part of the French Foreign Legion, which Russian Z bloggers had previously already virtually sent to the front lines in Ukraine many times. Therefore, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service continued the implementation of the Kremlin's concerted efforts to justify statements that Russia is at war with all of NATO and not just with Ukraine.
The Kremlin is resurrecting Soviet-era narratives of Russia's perpetual victimhood in the face of perceived external aggression in a dual attempt to justify Russia's future aggression against both Europe and the Asia-Pacific and the longer-term mobilization of Russian society. Russian officials also appear to be setting conditions to justify further militarization and full-scale mobilization of Russian society, from the Institute for the Study of War report.
When you promised to get Kyiv in 3 days, and today you control less territory than you did when you invaded Ukraine 4 years ago, you obviously need someone to shame in that. You need to bloat a bigger enemy, and you do your best to provoke the enemy to get any concrete reaction. I mean, any firm response from him, so to prove, yay, it is not you, it is them, that enemy that is aggressive against you. Even so, it is you who violated all possible laws, and your drones and missiles violate airspace of other countries. Like, for example, these 2 drones of unknown origin were spotted near a military base in southern Estonia on October 17th, and one was shot down by Allied forces, Estonian media reports. That is exactly modern Russian tactics. You show off and you rattle your rusty sword and you make your vassals to do the same. The Russian Oreshnik missile system will be placed on combat duty in Belarus in December 2025. So any discussions about the Oreshnik future are over, said Lukashenko's press secretary. Earlier that day, Lukashenko stated that the deployment of Oreshnik in Belarus is not an act of aggression. No, rather a response to escalation of the situation in the region and more than 3 years. That was a quote. We are not threatening anyone, they say. We are simply ensuring our own security, said dictator Lukashenko. Moreover, we are always open to constructive dialogue and mutual steps to reduce tensions. Belta quoted the Belarusian leader as saying he notes also that the deployment of the Oreshnik missile system in the country could be halted if European countries refuse to deploy new missile systems instead. Well, the show just must go on. Russian Tsar shows the world exactly what his policymakers are showing to him. A magic wand, Burevestnik Thunderbird missile that, as the Kremlin says, can fly 14,000 kilometers non-stop with its nuclear engine and destroy any target on the planet. A terrible, terrible weapon the world somehow just forgets to react at. Western countries have not issued any official diplomatic response to the test of mighty Burevestnik nuclear-capable missile. What an insult to the Kremlin.
Through diplomatic channels, I have not heard any reactions. Everything has fallen strangely silent.
Strangely, US intelligence in October provided members of Congress with an analysis, resulting in an obvious outcome. The dictator Putin is more determined than ever to continue the war in Ukraine, despite all meetings, all Trump's peace efforts, as per 2 senior American officials spoken to NBC News. According to intelligence, Russia has suffered significant military losses and economic difficulties, and both are mounting at the time, and so Moscow seeks to gain a foothold in Ukrainian territories and expand its influence there to justify the human and financial losses. The White House declined to comment to NBC reporters on the intelligence assessment and referred to Trump's public statements, those regarding the peace agreement, and also mentioned the sanctions imposed by the US Treasury Department against 2 major Russian oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil. Some experts transmit an interesting thought I want to share with you. So, to finish the topic, Putin can afford a war in Ukraine because he cannot afford 500,000 of angry, betrayed, wounded physically and psychologically, but, what most important, combat-capable Russians to return back to Russia. That seems to be it for today. I'm Henry Keane. Thank you so very much from the bottom of our 40 million Ukrainian hearts standing with Ukraine. Please subscribe to ATV channel. Don't forget to stay tuned to what is going on in the world seen from Ukrainian perspective. Thank you. Goodbye.